On a game show, the host asked my mom, "What's 1 plus 1?" My mom didn't hesitate. "It equals 3. Everyone froze. My family had joined the show to raise money for my astronomical medical bills. Answer 10 questions correctly and they'd win $5 million. After struggling through 9 questions, the host took pity and asked a softball question. This prize money was my lifeline. But my mom, a PhD in mathematics, deliberately answered it wrong. I bolted upright in my hospital bed, chest tight with pain. The post recovered quickly, plastering on a smile. Dr. Lily Smith is a mathematician's PhD. Perhaps in unexplored mathematical fields, 1 plus 1 can equal 3. However, the question I just asked is very simple. You only need to think like a first grader. But my mom blinked and said firmly, 1 plus 1 equals 3. The host's expression darkened. My brother held up 2 fingers, waving them frantically in front of Mom's face. "Mom, just answer one more question correctly, and we can get the prize money for Chloe's surgery. This isn't the time for jokes." Dad was sweating bullets, too. "Honey, did you mishear the question? Or did you misspeak?" But no matter how Dad and my brother pleaded, Mom stuck to her answer. 1 plus 1 equals 3. The audience exploded. Is this mother insane? This has to be scripted. What mother would want her own child to die? Each question had a 10-minute time limit. As the countdown neared its end, I begged the doctor to help me video call the show. The production team connected immediately. My pale, weak face appeared on the big screen. Crowd gasped in sympathy. The host's eyes reddened with emotion. At 16, I've been diagnosed with a malignant heart tumor, and was in critical condition every moment. The only hope for my survival was this prize money. The host was frantic. There are only 3 minutes left on the countdown. If you answer incorrectly, all your family's efforts will be wasted. Qualify for the show. My whole family had stayed up for 3 months, memorizing the question bank. They barely made it through 9 questions. And now Mom was spouting nonsense. On the 10th, I spoke carefully. "Mom, the prize is $5 million. My treatment only cost $3 million. I won't take a penny of what's left. When I recover, I'll work hard and give you every paycheck to show my gratitude. The crowd murmured sympathetically. Mom's eyes welled up, too. With 10 seconds left on the countdown, Mom raised her hand to indicate she wanted to change her answer. I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe Mom had just been joking with everyone. "I'm sorry I misspoke earlier. 1 plus 1 should equal. I held my breath. Mom surveyed the room, then suddenly smiled. 1 plus 1 equals 1. The countdown ended. The $5 million on the screen instantly disappeared. Then Mom said leisurely, "Sorry. I was careless and said it wrong. 1 plus 1 should equal 2. But the countdown had ended. My surgery funds were gone. Sharp pain shot through my chest. I nearly blacked out from the agony. My brother lost control, shouting, "Mom! What are you doing? Chloe's going to die." Mom just calmly pointed at the screen. "Look. Isn't Chloe suffering? You know she's suffering. And you deliberately answered wrong. My brother's eyes were bloodshot. You knew perfectly well that if you answered correctly, she could live. This is all your fault." Mom suddenly raised her voice. "My fault? I didn't do it on purpose. Of course. I know 1 plus 1 equals 2. But I was just careless." "Careless?" My eyes widened in shock. How could anyone carelessly answer 1 plus 1 wrong? Mom knew perfectly well that without the prize money for surgery, I would die immediately. Why would she? Amid everyone's confusion and anger, Mom raised an eyebrow and turned to look at my brother. "Carson, do you remember on your middle school entrance exam? You lost a full 5 points because you wrote 1 plus 1 equals 3. Because of those 5 points, you couldn't get into the top middle school. When I criticized you then, you had the nerve to talk back. saying you were just careless and would be more careful next time. Today, I'm showing you exactly what kind of consequences a moment of carelessness can cause. Mom pointed at the big screen. Take a good look. And remember what Chloe looks like right now. Covered in sweat from pain. This is the consequence of carelessness. Today, I'm using your sister's suffering to teach you a lesson. Everyone exploded. I stared in disbelief. My brother was already a college junior. Mom was still holding a grudge about his middle school entrance exam. Dad was furious. You realize Chloe's about to die. If you wanted to teach Carson a lesson, couldn't you have picked another time? Mom muttered impatiently. Doctors always exaggerate. Chloe's so young. She can definitely hold on longer than other people. Carson's careless habits should have been corrected long ago. Gentle methods don't work. So I'm giving him a lesson he'll remember in his bones. I could barely breathe. The nurse gripped my hands tightly, her eyes full of pity. Dad roared that he'd fight Mom to the death. Mom raised her hand to block him. What's the rush? Doesn't the show have one more bonus round? If we answer the next question correctly, we won't get 5 million. But we can still get 3 million. That's enough for Chloe's surgery. With the host's intervention, Dad and my brother finally calmed down. Mom looked at the big screen, her gaze tender. Chloe, hang in there a little longer. Mom just wanted to take this opportunity to teach your brother a lesson. I promise I'll answer the next question correctly. I bit my lip hard, forcing back tears. Mom, I know you love me. But for the next question, can Dad or Carson answer instead? Mom's expression froze. Dad and my brother were afraid Mom would pull another stunt, and strongly supported my suggestion. But unfortunately, during the earlier rounds, they'd already used up their chances to answer. So Mom had to go up again. This last question determined whether I lived or died. The studio fell silent. The host was sweating as he frantically searched the question bank, finally selecting the simplest possible question. Miss Lily Smith, what's your birthday? I relaxed, looking at the host with gratitude. Mom hit the answer button without hesitation. But said host, I'd like to use my lifeline. Phone a friend. The room erupted. How could someone not remember their own birthday? A wave of panic hit me. Since I got sick, Mom had been getting more and more gray hair. I'd heard that middle-aged people under prolonged mental stress could easily develop dementia. Mom's condition already deteriorated this badly. Tears blurred my vision. My hands trembled. Mom chose Dad as her lifeline. Dad looked helpless. Your birthday is January 8th. Mom nodded and pressed the answer button again, but was suddenly stopped by my anxious brother. Mom, did you hear clearly? What date is it exactly? Repeat it. At my brother's insistence, Mom repeated January 8th 3 times before being allowed to press the answer button. But Mom still didn't speak. Seeing Mom's nervousness, I endured the sharp pain in my heart and tried to comfort her. Don't be afraid, Mom. Just answer this one question and it'll all be over. Mom smiled at me, but her answer plunged me into ice-cold despair. My birthday is January 9th. The air froze instantly. The host immediately tried to smooth things over. Your husband said your birthday is January 8th. Miss Smith must have misspoken. Please answer again. But Mom's gaze was resolute. I didn't misspeak. I said it wrong on purpose. The audience exploded. My heart hurts so badly. I couldn't straighten up. Nurse tried to end the video call, but I stopped her. Mom, why did you deliberately answer wrong again? My voice shook with pain. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but her tone was aggrieved. It's all your father's fault. Not just Dad. Everyone was stunned. Dad had told her the correct answer. What had he done wrong? Under the host's questioning, Mom wiped her tears and revealed the truth. Few weeks ago was our 20th wedding anniversary and my birthday. But Sean actually got the date wrong. Sean, you said my birthday was January 9th. So now I'm making it come true. Dad's veins bulged with anger. I did accidentally get your birthday wrong. But those few days I was working consecutive all-nighters to earn medical expenses for Chloe. I was completely exhausted and confused. So I got the date wrong. I apologized afterward. And worked 3 more weeks of all-night delivery shifts to buy you a gold bracelet to make up for it. Isn't that enough? Mom said nothing. Just bowed her head and wiped her tears. The countdown kept ticking down. The burning pain in my chest had become unbearable. Cold sweat soaking the bed sheets. Dad kept begging Mom to give the correct answer so they could get the money and rush me into surgery. But Mom remained unmoved. I was completely heartbroken. So my life was just a tool for Mom to teach my family lessons. 3 minutes left on the countdown. Using all my strength, I personally ended the live stream. The doctors and nurses in the room all had red eyes. My voice was barely a whisper, but utterly determined. Doctor, I want to sign an organ donation agreement. Also after I die, I want my mom to witness the entire organ removal process. Mom, don't you love teaching people lessons? Then today, I'll teach you one, too. The second I finished signing, excruciating pain engulfed my entire body. Everything went black. In the last second, before I lost consciousness, I heard Mom roaring on the show. What are you all panicking about? Chloe's illness isn't new. How could she suddenly die just like that? Dad was forced to his knees before Mom in front of a national audience, begging forgiveness and promising never to forget another important date. Mom finally gave the correct answer in the last second, before the countdown ended. But it was already too late. In the emergency room, doctors frantically pressed on my chest. But my heartbeat grew weaker and weaker. The attending physician shouted, "We need to operate now." But the prize money hadn't arrived yet. My account only had a few $100s. Hospital policy only allowed standard emergency care. As consciousness faded, I seemed to see Mom. Mom, you knew I could die any second. Why did you keep deliberately answering wrong and wasting time? Mom, don't you love me? The doctor's CPR grew more forceful. I could almost hear my ribs cracking. Mom, I really can't hold on much longer. If you could just come see me one last time, I wouldn't blame you. But I waited and waited. Shot after shot of epinephrine was injected into my veins. Yet my breathing still gradually weakened. The monitor beeped. Hospital policy: no money. No surgery. The doctor called the production team furiously. Didn't they answer correctly? Why hasn't the prize money arrived? But the production team was helpless, too. We wanted to transfer the money directly to the hospital account, but her mother insisted on cash. They're probably rushing to the hospital with the cash now. The breath I've been barely holding on to finally gave out. My heart monitor flatlined. Then I heard my family arguing. Chloe's hanging by a thread. Why did you insist on cash? Mom said self-righteously. 3 years ago you got scammed out of $200 online. Online payments are so dangerous. And you still haven't learned? Cash is safest. Today I'm teaching you a good lesson. Dad was frantic, rushing forward. Fine. Fine. Cash is safe. But what about Chloe? Every second she waits puts her in more danger. Mom said reluctantly, stop talking. If Chloe's in danger, it's because you cursed her. She was fine this morning. How could something happen this afternoon in the emergency room? The doctor was pulling a white sheet over my face. Oblivious Mom pushed open my hospital room door. Chloe. Mom brought the money. The door to the hospital room swung open with a pneumatic hiss. My mother stood there, clutching a battered leather suitcase against her chest like a shield. She was breathless, her hair slightly askew, a sheen of sweat on her forehead. But she was smiling. It was that tight, triumphant smile she wore when she solved a particularly difficult differential equation. I told you, she announced, her voice breathless but steady. The bank tried to put a hold on the withdrawal, but I quoted banking regulations until the manager folded. Cash. Hard, untraceable, immediate cash. She marched to the foot of the bed, dropping the heavy suitcase. It landed with a dull thud. Well, she said, looking at the doctor, then at Dad, and finally at Carson. Why is it so quiet? Count it if you must. Then get her into surgery. I've taught you all enough for one day. No one moved. The silence wasn't the silence of a library or a paused conversation. It was the vacuum of space. It was the silence of a room where the fundamental variable, life, had been subtracted. Dad was slumped in the corner, his face buried in his hands. Carson was staring at the floor, his body shaking with a violent, rhythmic tremor. The doctor, a man named Dr. Eris who had fought for my life for 3 years, slowly pulled the white sheet up. He didn't stop at my chin. He pulled it up over my nose. Over my eyes. Over the crown of my head. Mrs. Smith, Dr. Eris said. His voice was devoid of professional courtesy. It was jagged, like broken glass. You are 5 minutes late. Mom blinked. She looked at the lump under the sheet, then let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Stop it. The timer on the machine said, well, the machine is off now. But she can't be dead. I calculated the degradation rate of her vitals based on the charts you gave me last week. She had at least another 45 minutes of reserve capacity. She stepped forward and poked the shrouded form that used to be me. Chloe, stop playing games. I have the money. You proved your point, I proved mine. Now let's go. She's gone, Lily, Dad whispered. The sound was so broken it didn't sound like a human voice. She's gone. She is not. Mom snapped, her logic fracturing. People don't just die because a clock runs out. That's cinematic nonsense. Chloe, get up. She reached for the sheet. Dr. Eris caught her wrist. His grip was bruising. Don't touch the body, Dr. Eris said. The body? Mom's face paled, the first crack in her armor appearing. She's my daughter. I'll touch her if I want to. You lost that right when you gambled her life for a lesson on punctuality, Dr. Eris spat. He released her hand as if it were contaminated. He walked to the counter and picked up a clipboard. Chloe was lucid in her final moments. She signed a directive. It was witnessed by myself and 2 nurses. It is legally binding. Mom rubbed her wrist, scoffing. A minor can't sign legal documents without parental consent. She turned 16 2 weeks ago. In this state, for organ donation, she has agency. And given the negligence displayed by her guardians, I made sure the hospital legal team was on the line. Dr. Eris held up the paper. She has donated everything. Corneas. Liver. Kidneys. Skin. Lungs. Mom froze. Organ donation? No. We need to arrange a funeral. An open casket. She has to look presentable. I won't have her butchered. Dr. Eris stepped closer to her. He towered over her small frame. There is a stipulated clause, he said softly. Chloe was very specific. She anticipated you would try to stop it. She said you need to learn one final lesson. What lesson? Mom asked, her voice trembling. She requested that you witness the procurement. Mom took a step back. What? She wanted you to watch, Dr. Eris said. She said, Mom loves to see the consequences of actions. Show her the consequence of this one. I won't, Mom whispered. That's barbaric. Then leave, Carson suddenly screamed. He lunged at her, only held back by Dad grabbing his waist. Leave. Get out. Take your money and get out. Mom looked at Carson, then at the suitcase of money, and finally at the sheet covering me. Her mathematician's brain was misfiring. The equation wasn't balancing. If she left, she admitted defeat. If she left, she admitted she was wrong. And Lily Smith was never wrong. She straightened her blazer. She smoothed her hair. Fine, she said coldly. If that's what she wants. I'll watch. It's just a medical procedure. I've seen diagrams. It's just biology. They made her scrub in. They put her in a gown and a mask, but they didn't let her stand near the table. She was placed behind the observation glass, usually reserved for students, but the audio was piped in. My spirit, or whatever residue of consciousness remained, hovered in the cold air of the operating theater. I watched her. She stood with her arms crossed, her chin high. She was treating this like a lecture she disagreed with. Below, the team went to work. There is a violence to surgery that people don't understand. It isn't graceful. It is the prying open of the human cage. When the scalpel first parted the skin of my chest, Mom didn't flinch. She watched the red line appear with clinical detachment. Epidermis, dermis, subcutaneous fat, I could hear her thinking. Just layers. Then came the sternal saw. The sound is distinct. It is a high-pitched mechanical whine that drops in frequency as it bites into bone. It vibrates through the teeth of everyone in the room. Zzzzzzzzzt. On the other side of the glass, Mom's hands twitched. She uncrossed her arms and gripped the railing. The chest was cracked open. Retractors were applied. The ribcage, the shield that had failed to protect my failing heart, was cranked apart with a wet, clicking sound. Dr. Eris looked up at the glass. He locked eyes with her. The heart, he announced into his microphone. Hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Severe dilation. It struggled for 3 years, Mrs. Smith. It fought very hard. He reached in. His gloved hands disappeared into the cavity of my chest. Mom was pressing her face against the glass now. Her breath was fogging it up. She wiped it away frantically. Time of death was caused by cardiac arrest due to prolonged stress and lack of intervention, Dr. Eris narrated. He wasn't talking to the nurses. He was talking to her. We are removing the heart now. It is not viable for transplant. It is too damaged. He lifted it out. It was a wet, dark red mass. It looked heavy. Mom's knees buckled. She didn't fall, but she sank lower. That's... She mumbled. The microphone in the observation deck picked up her whisper. That's my baby's heart. It was, Dr. Eris corrected. Now it is medical waste. Because the funding for the corrective valve replacement arrived 19 minutes too late. He dropped the heart into a metal tray. Clang. The sound echoed in the room. Mom flinched as if she'd been slapped. They moved to the liver. Then the kidneys. Piece by piece, they dismantled the vessel I had lived in. It was a systematic subtraction. 1 minus 1. Minus 1. Minus 1. When they removed my corneas, leaving my eyes sunken and dull, Mom let out a sound that wasn't a word. It was a high, keening wail. She clawed at the glass. Stop it. Put it back, she screamed. That belongs to me. That's Chloe. Put her back together. Dr. Eris didn't look up this time. We are harvesting the lungs now. The recipient is a 12-year-old boy in Ohio. He has cystic fibrosis. His mother sold her car to get him on the list. She didn't wait for a game show. I have $5 million. Mom shrieked, slamming her fist against the safety glass. I have $3 million in cash. Take the money. Give me back my daughter. The transaction is complete, Mrs. Smith, Dr. Eris said calmly. The surgery is over. He signaled the team. They began to close the empty shell. Mom slid down the wall of the observation deck, curling into a ball. The confident PhD, the master of logic, was reduced to a heap on the floor, rocking back and forth, muttering the same thing over and over. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 1 is 2. Why isn't it 2? Why is it 0? The funeral was closed casket. Mom tried to fight it, demanding to see me one last time, but Carson physically blocked the door to the funeral home. You saw her, Carson spat, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. You saw her on the inside. That's what you wanted, right? Truth. No sugarcoating. The video of the game show had gone viral before my body was even cold. The internet is a cruel judge, but rarely had it been so unanimous. They called her the math monster. Memes circulated of her face saying, 1 plus 1 equals 3, superimposed over images of my dying face. The university fired her 2 days after the funeral. They cited conduct unbecoming and moral turpitude. But the real collapse happened at home. I watched from the shadows of the house I grew up in. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Dad was packing a bag. He moved slowly, like an old man. Sean. Mom stood in the doorway of the bedroom. She was wearing the same clothes she had worn to the funeral. Where are you going? We need to calculate the finances. The hospital bill is. I paid the bill, Dad said quietly. I used the life insurance policy. We have the prize money, she insisted. 3 million. It's sitting in the safe. We should invest it. If we put it in a high-yield index fund, in 10 years. Dad turned around. He held a pair of socks in his hand. He looked at her with an expression of utter exhaustion. I'm leaving, Lily. Leaving? That's illogical. Divorce is expensive. It splits the assets. We are stronger as a fiscal unit. I'm not a fiscal unit. Dad roared. He threw the socks at her. They hit her chest harmlessly, but she flinched. I'm a father who watched his daughter die because his wife wanted to win an argument. I hate you, Lily. I don't just dislike you. I look at you and I see a murderer. I didn't kill her. Mom stomped her foot. The disease killed her. I was trying to secure our future. Carson needs tuition. You need retirement. I was thinking of everyone. You were thinking of yourself, Dad said. He zipped the bag. Carson is already gone. He's staying at his girlfriend's. He changed his number. He said if you try to contact him, he'll get a restraining order. He's being emotional. He'll calm down. He won't, Dad said. He walked past her. And neither will I. Sean. You can't leave. What about the probability of us? The probability is 0, Dad said. The front door slammed. Mom stood in the hallway. She was alone. The house was big, and empty, and quiet. She walked to the safe in the study. She spun the dial, left 30, right 15, left 09. My birthday. She opened it. Inside were stacks of cash. $3 million in used bills. It smelled like ink and greed. She reached in and touched the money. I won, she whispered to the empty room. I answered the question. I got the money. I won. But the silence of the house was so loud it hurt her ears. 6 months passed. Mom didn't leave the house. She ordered groceries online. She kept the blinds drawn. She began to obsess. She turned the living room into a giant whiteboard. She bought markers and started writing on the walls. Equations. Probabilities. Chaos theory. She was trying to find the variable she had missed. Let X be the time of the show. Let Y be the delay in answering. Let Z be the biological resilience of Chloe's heart. She covered the wallpaper in frantic scrawls. She calculated the speed of the ambulance. She calculated the flow rate of the epinephrine. I watched her from the corner of the room. She looked like a ghost herself. Her hair was graying and unwashed. She had lost 30 pounds. If I had answered, January 9th, 2 seconds faster, she muttered, scribbling furiously. The transaction time would have decreased by 4.5 seconds. The dopamine response in the host would have, no, no, no. She erased a section of the wall with her bare hand, smearing ink over her palm. The variable is Sean, she hissed. If Sean hadn't argued. If Carson hadn't waved his hands. They introduced chaos into the system. She was rewriting history, trying to mathematically prove that she wasn't at fault. One night, the power went out. A storm. She sat in the dark, surrounded by the $3 million. She had stacked the cash in towers on the coffee table. She had built a little fort out of the money. She lit a candle. Chloe, she called out. I didn't answer. I know you're here. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. First law of thermodynamics. You are energy. Therefore, you are here. She picked up a stack of $100 bills. I have the money, she said, her voice trembling. I can pay for the surgery now. Come back. She held the money out to the empty air. Please. I'll admit it. 1 + 1 = 2. It equals 2. I promise. Just come back and take the money. The silence stretched. Then, a draft from the window blew one of the stacks of money over. The bills fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. Mom stared at them. Something in her mind finally snapped. The rigid structure of logic she had built her life around collapsed under the weight of her grief. She started laughing. It was a dry, rasping sound. She picked up the candle. It's the wrong currency, she whispered. That's the problem. Life doesn't accept dollars. She touched the flame to the corner of $100 bill. It caught instantly. She threw the burning bill onto the pile. Payment, she giggled. Payment in full. I watched as the fire grew. It licked up the sides of the money towers. $3 million, my lifeline, my death sentence, began to curl into ash. The smoke alarm beeped. She ignored it. She sat cross-legged on the floor, watching the fortune burn. The heat was intense. The walls, covered in her equations, began to blister and peel. The math was melting. 1 + 1 = 0, she chanted. 1 + 1 = 0. The firefighters pulled her out. She was unconscious from smoke inhalation, clutching a single, half-burnt $100 bill. They took her to the same hospital where I died. She woke up in the psychiatric ward. Carson came to visit her once, a month later. He stood on the other side of the safety glass, just like she had stood on the other side of the operating room glass. Mom looked at him. She was sedated, calm, wearing a hospital gown. Carson, she smiled. Did you study for your exam? Carelessness causes. I dropped out, Mom, Carson said. His voice was flat. I'm working construction. I'm happy. I don't have to think about math. Mom frowned. That's a waste of potential. The ROI on a degree. Mom, Carson interrupted. I came to tell you something. Dad is getting remarried. To a woman who works at a bakery. She's nice. She's terrible at math. She thinks a baker's dozen is 12. Mom twitched. That's incorrect. And I'm moving to Oregon, Carson continued. I'm never coming back here. But the lesson, Mom whispered. I taught you the lesson. You did, Carson nodded. He placed his hand on the glass. You taught us that being right is the loneliest thing in the world. He turned and walked away. Wait. Mom shouted. Wait. What is the solution? Carson. The equation isn't balanced. He didn't look back. Mom was left alone in the white room. Years passed. She became the math lady of the ward. She would corner nurses and try to explain to them that time was a reversible vector if you just had enough money. I stayed with her for a long time, but eventually, even I had to go. The tether that held me, her guilt, her refusal to let go, was fraying. The last time I saw her, she was an old woman. She was sitting by the window, looking out at the rain. She wasn't writing equations anymore. She was holding a piece of paper. It was an old, charred scrap of a receipt she had saved from that day. She looked at her reflection in the window. Chloe, she whispered. I moved a little closer. The air shimmered. I know the answer now, she said softly. She closed her eyes. 1 + 1, she murmured. Is just 1. She meant herself. She finally understood. When you subtract the people you love to prove a point, you don't get a remainder. You don't get a surplus. You just get yourself. Alone. 1. She exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. Her hand relaxed. The paper fluttered to the floor. The monitor next to her bed didn't beep frantically. It just hummed a low, steady tone as the line went flat. I looked at her one last time. She looked small. She didn't look like a giant anymore. She didn't look like a monster. She just looked like a woman who had miscalculated everything. I turned away from the bed. The hospital room dissolved. The pain in my chest was gone. The anger was gone. The equation was finally solved. 1 = 0. And in the silence of 0, there was finally peace.